Hello everyone, welcome along to Live on Air tonight. I've got Stuart McAdam and James and Laurel Kells, and they're going to be talking about tiny homes. So Stuart, would you like to kick off with your questions? We're very enthusiastic about wanting to find out what it is to live and build and all of that kind of thing in tiny homes. And we've got two experts, two people who've done it sitting here. So tell us what it's all about, Stuart.
Yeah, no, thanks very much, David. I went down to see Laurel and James's tiny home at the sort of final stages when most of the grunt work had been done, and it was an amazing accomplishment which sort of two people assisted by close family and friends to sort of pull it off by themselves. So well done. But before we get into those questions, Laurel and James, just tell us a bit about who you are and what you do.
I am Laurel, and I'm a nutritionist. I run an online and in-person nutrition coaching business. And
I'm James, and obviously Laurel's husband, and I'm a design engineer by profession, and at the moment I'm doing a few different business ventures which are engineering related, some of them actually related to tiny houses.
And tell us, James, where did you first hear about the idea of tiny homes? Did you read about it in a magazine, or did a friend mention it? How did you hear about it?
Well, we initially wanted to build a container house. It was probably, I learned about container houses before I heard about tiny houses. And Laurel and I, when we first got married, we kind of had this dream to build a container house together and go off the grid and all that kind of stuff. And we actually started designing a container house for ourselves before we built or designed this tiny house. And we sort of got halfway through that process, and then I guess just in the research of doing container houses, discovered tiny houses online and Pinterest and things like that. There's thousands and thousands of tiny house ideas out there.
I know it from there.
What were your thoughts around it, Laurel, when it was first floated into your mind? What were your thoughts about sort of tiny homes and container homes?
Well, when we were just dating, we didn't date for long, but when we were dating, we just talked about building a container house together and living in Africa and making container home villages of, just like safer, I guess, easier to build homes for locals and community development. So I was all down for it. And I think the container homes I've looked at include about 12 containers. Container home mansions, that's what I like. But then when we got into tiny homes, I just thought they were fun. But I think we're dreamers, so I'm really good at dreaming, and it doesn't mean it's actually going to happen, but this can actually happen.
And as far as all of the planning that goes into it, obviously building a regular house, there's a lot of ins and outs which many people may not be aware of. But I guess with container homes or tiny homes, especially in your regards, there must have been quite a lot of planning that went into it. What were the sort of steps and processes that you had to go through to take it from a sort of dream into something which had a solid blueprint to it?
Well, I think obviously being a design engineer helped a little bit with that one. I was able to do a lot of the design and CAD design using CAD software to actually design up our idea or ideas. Laurel was probably more of a conceptual person with Pinterest ideas. She came to me with like a Pinterest board and was like, I want this. So colours and materials and all that kind of stuff. So we kind of just team together, and me using my engineering capabilities and her
using Pinterest
ideas and Pinterest, we kind of came up with a design together, and that was the beginning.
But that was a long process, wasn't it?
How long did it take?
Yeah, we probably spent a month or two doing the design, maybe.
Yeah, and that was almost full time as far as what you were doing.
Yeah, there was some other things happening, but we spent a bit of time on it. One of the biggest challenges, as you know, Stuart, was we did build quite a large tiny house. So it wasn't as easy as just, okay, let's make it look like this, let's build it. Pretty simple, it's a box. Because we built so big, we had to kind of dive into a bit more of the engineering side of it and make sure that it wasn't overweight, and had to be quite conservative with materials used and all that kind of stuff. So there was a bit of work that went into it.
And where did you go in terms of like sourcing all of these materials? Was that I guess a job in itself?
Most materials you can get through, your normal building, Mitre 10, Bunnings, those kind of places. Some of the lightweight timbers we had to get from other timber merchants and things like that.
You know why I'm laughing?
Absolutely, the customer service.
I love.
Tell us a bit about the challenge which that presented. I guess throughout the journey before we get to the next question.
Yeah, that caused a lot of delays. Just ordering things, expecting them to arrive at a certain point, and they did not arrive at that point, and so that was a little frustrating. But you couldn't do much about it. So we encountered a lot of delays because of just waiting for stuff to come. We don't know where it went, but it took a long time to get here in this tiny little country.
And let's come towards the build now. So all the plans and foundations had been set in place, and you began the build. What was sort of like the first stages of it, and did each of you take on different responsibilities during the build itself?
Well, the first stage was obviously most tiny houses, a legitimate tiny house is built on a trailer. So that was the very first stage of it. Was I built a large 3 by 9 meter trailer, and then everything got built on top of that. As far as as far as roles.
So James did everything that James does everything. And then I just kind of fit in with where I could be helpful. So even like with the trailer, I can't do the welding. I can't do any of that, but I came in when it was the painting part. So with each step of the process, it was me just tagging along as soon as there was a job that I could do without it being, needing James' expertise.
That's a very interesting kind of question and answer, because it's there's an implied teamwork, isn't there? Someone has to take responsibility for a whole lot of things. Obviously, that's James, but overall, it's much harder to do things if you're a sole operator. There's an element of teamwork, isn't there? And there's an encouragement that's got to go on alongside of just the actual physical build.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, it wasn't an easy task, I'll say that. Probably thought it was going to be a bit easier than what I thought it was going to be to build something.
He told me at the beginning that it was going to take less than a month.
How long did it actually take?
I got tricked into it all, because I think if he had told me, because we had to live with his parents while we were doing the build, because we moved out of our apartment and had just bought land for this tiny house. So I think if I had known how long it was going to take, I don't think I would have been on board from the beginning. So it's good I didn't know. It's good I went in completely naive to the reality of building, because I'd never been involved in a project like that.
So did this test your relationship, did it?
No, I wouldn't say it really tested our relationship. It just built on what we already have. Nothing about the process was fun.
Except finishing it.
But I'd say that we're a really good team, and so if anything, it just made us come together even more than we already are. And so it required us to have a lot of grace for each other, and it was just a totally different pace of life than what we were used to. We were used to a really just cruisy, easy, cuddly life together, and all of a sudden we're sweating in this hot box 7 days a week, pretty miserable in that process, but learning how to love each other in the midst of it. That was
Well, I think, Laurel, from a previous interview that we did with you and your work in nutrition, etc., if there's one area that really shines in terms of relationship, it's your and obviously James's ability to get on and learn life through loving and grace. But I can't imagine a more difficult process than A, living with your parents, B, trying to build a tiny home, and all of these things. And Stuart, you were going to ask them perhaps that were there unexpected challenges. Do you want to amplify that for us, please?
Yeah, I suppose beyond the sort of Kiwi customer service, which Laurel mentioned earlier on, what were some of the other things that you found sort of like difficult or challenging? I can imagine as well in your own personal capacity, a lot of your life in that period of time did revolve around the tiny home and the building of it and just getting stuff done. And I just wanted to get your thoughts on how that shaped you as people and as a couple.
Yeah, I guess the because like Laurel says, we were working kind of 7 days a week for a lot of the weeks in that period, and
we were not created to do that.
No, we weren't created to do that, and I definitely learnt. I mean, we're both Christians, and I think 1 day off a week is actually a brilliant idea.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that was challenging.
We learned a lot about our capacity. Yeah, that your physical capacity is actually not as productive to work 7 days a week as it is to work, say, 6 and rest that 1 day. You're far more productive when you are rested and when you do take time off to even just one, sleep, but also just have fun together, because then we work way better together because we were connected and we had some downtime versus just plowing away at this tiny house nonstop, where that time spent working wasn't actually as productive as it could have been.
But emotionally too, I think when you're doing something over and over like 7 days straight is a very monotonous thing. You don't get the quality time that you have together. Even though you're together a lot of the time, like Laurel and I were, but there's a lot of stress going on, very preoccupied. You come home after a long day and you're just both exhausted, and then you get up and do it all over again the next morning. So that part is hard.
When you get to the point of finishing it and you actually move into your tiny home, what kind of space are you moving into? How many hundreds of square meters of space is there?
Ours was a 3x9 meter home, and it had 2 mezzanines on it, so roughly equated to about 35 square meters with the 2 mezzanines. So
what's it like living in that kind of space?
We loved it.
We did. We loved it. I mean,
and we both work from home.
Yeah, I'd do it again.
Definitely. I wouldn't. No, I definitely wouldn't. Yeah, we absolutely loved it. I think it's really great that we can't get enough of each other, because we do both work from home, so we're in that tiny space all the time. But I think the design was it was really well done. And so even with being a nutritionist, I love cooking, and so the kitchen space was enough to make me happy. Like, I never felt claustrophobic. We never felt really boxed in. I think the only time that was hard was when it was winter and it was raining, and you find that you move very little in a space like that when the weather's not nice. And so that was when getting out was good for both our mental and emotional and physical health. But other than that, we really enjoyed it.
And I had another question for you. You bought a piece of land, a pretty sizable piece of land. What inspired you, or what motivated you to build the tiny home over just building a regular house?
Well, yeah, multiple reasons. As you know, New Zealand has a very challenging housing market for people that aren't already in the housing market. And so, yeah, Laurel and I coming back from overseas, I lived in Australia for a long time, obviously Laurel's from America, so coming back here, both, with our own, setting up our own businesses and things like that, it just wasn't really feasible. It wasn't possible to build a big house at this stage in our lives. So, yeah, obviously buying land, it kind of gets you halfway there, it gets your foot in the door, and that's what we did. And we thought, well, tiny house is a great, temporary solution, I suppose, and obviously just the two of us, so it works.
Yeah, because the whole plan was to buy, once we bought the land, we were like, oh, this is great, we'll finally build our tiny house, and we'll live in that while we do the main build, and that was the plan at the time, but then that plan has changed a bit.
Why was that, Laurel?
Yeah, so we were in the tiny house for how many months?
5 or 6 months, I think, we're living in our tiny house, yeah. Yeah,
and we got pregnant, and so we actually planned for a baby. We made baby a little room in the tiny house because still the plan was to live in that tiny house until we built our main house. So we have no expectation of that process being quick here. So we're realistic about that. But then we live on, or the piece of land is on the top of a hill overlooking Lake Taupo, and it gets really, really windy. So the tiny house would shake, and the wind turbine would sound like a jet engine. And so those were the two factors that affected us kind of assessing our situation and realizing this probably isn't that conducive for a newborn child. When you've got your house shaking and a jet engine sound in your ear all night on a windy night.
And tell us, Laurel, James, what advice would you have for a personal or a couple that are wanting to build their own tiny home? What would your sort of pieces of advice be?
Practical or relational?
We'll go to James for the practical, and we'll get you to do the relational, Laurel.
Yeah, practically, I think
you can do it.
Yeah, it's totally doable. There's different options that you can have. Obviously, tiny houses are becoming very popular in New Zealand now. There's a lot of companies that are building them. There's a lot of information and material resources if you want to build your own one. We obviously started ours from scratch, so that's that's as raw as it gets, I suppose. But you can buy the trailers now. You can have the floors all done, and you can kind of buy them at different stages. I've even seen kit set tiny houses available now. So I guess it's just weighing up your options, what you can really commit to. We committed 3 months to it, and pushed it out and did it in that time. But if, there's options if you don't have that kind of time. And I guess materials too. I've actually just recently started a little side business importing some aluminium structurally insulated panels from overseas because they're not available in New Zealand. So just looking at, do research on your materials. Obviously, there's a lot of ideas out there, and talk to people who have done it.
Join the Facebook
pages, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I guess relationally, I would say I have a lot that I can say, but I think just be gracious with one another. Like it's a very demanding process if you commit all your time to it, and especially if there's any sort of time restrictions on that, the pressure gets turned up. And so to just have realistic expectations, but when you feel the pressure turning up, realize you staying connected with whoever you're working with is going to make the whole process a lot easier and more efficient than biting each other's heads off and thinking that's going to help, because it doesn't.
I think it's a remarkably, both a wise decision, but also got a fair degree of courage when you got to the point in being up above Lake Taupo, looking out over a beautiful view on your own plot of land, but realizing that, there's something about this wind factor that may not be 100% conducive to a little baby. Because in a way you have to put your dream aside, even though you're putting it aside for a bigger dream. And so that does take a fair degree of courage. But I imagine that there are going to be some young couples who are looking at this who are going to pick up on the same dream because they can't afford or don't want that kind of, package deal that takes you in over your head in terms of mortgages, etc. There are other options for people that they can choose, and I feel that you've chosen a remarkably good one. Stuart, have you got any final question that you would like to put to Laurel and James?
Yeah, now that you're not in the tiny home anymore, Laurel, James, where do you from here for you guys?
Well, I guess for me, like I mentioned earlier, like I've got a couple of business ventures playing out at the moment. I'm sowing some seeds into those. David's exactly right. Sometimes you do have to give up dreams to pursue bigger ones, and that's kind of where I'm at the moment. I guess you hear a lot, you kind of in Christian communities that you've got to hold things a little bit loosely, and I guess for me that was definitely one of those times. But when you do let go of them, and there's definitely bigger and better things there. I'm started up a little business with importing these special materials from overseas and making them available to the tiny house community and other people. And also got a couple of other ones which
stay tuned.
Yeah, stay tuned for. So yeah.
And just one question as well. You actually had a Facebook page that documented the journey of building a tiny home. Could you just tell the audience what the name of that Facebook page is, and we'll link it into the description below.
Yeah, it's called Our Big Tiny Build.
Our Big Tiny Build.
Tiny Build, I think.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, first of all, thank you, both of you, Laurel and James, and also thank you to Stuart for coming in and hosting live on air this evening. We'll put those links up. It's been fantastic, and we wish you all the best for what's going to happen in the future.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks to you guys
so much.
too. Yeah, thanks for having us.
Good talk.